I would love to be able to sit on my sofa, put myself inside the car with Max and somehow feel his heart rate, feel the forces on his body and be immersed in that world. It would be a hell of a ride.
Well, David, thank you for being with us. In 2022, you headlined the Red Bull Showrun in Belgrade. And I imagine that was a great experience. And now you've brought that to Sarajevo. So can you speak a little bit about how that experience in Belgrade will influence how the Showrun gets executed here in Sarajevo, and any lessons learned or anything that you can share, insights you can share about that experience?
Yeah, well, the event we did in Belgrade, great personal experience for me because it was my first time there, and you get to spend time around the city and you get to meet people from the local market, and it's a different experience than if you just flew in as a tourist for the weekend. And you get to drive a Formula One car on the streets and put it in front of people that have never seen an F1 car before. So every showrun we do, and this year I've been in America, I've been in Poland, and here now in Sarajevo, and we're always learning, and we're always able to share those learnings with the local Red Bull market, who ultimately have to do all the really difficult work of getting the permissions and finding locations and then finally getting us to be here. So the most important thing I always feel, of course, is the experience for those that come along. That's the thing that will go way beyond a news clip or a little bit of publicity. If people are still talking about it a year later and beyond because they've had their first experience of Formula One, then what you've done is captured another generation, a generation that don't have access to Formula One in terms of a racetrack. They have it, of course, through television, but this event puts the car on the streets, and the car I'll drive is a World Championship car from Sebastian Vettel, so you're looking at a piece of history.
In addition to your involvement with the Red Bull Showrun, commentating on racing, how do you continue to stay connected to Formula One?
My passion is very simple in that I want to be entertained, and I grew up watching Formula One on television. It was this amazing world of what I understood from an early age is the fastest cars built by these passionate race teams that are still involved today. Some new teams, of course, like Red Bull Racing, which is celebrating its 20th year. But when I first started watching the sport, it was your Ferraris and your McLarens and your Williams and teams like that. So that was something that I found incredible. And even if it meant waking up at 5 in the morning to watch, whatever Grand Prix it was, I just was drawn to the sport and the technology and the challenge. So that remains the same today. I had an era where I was a driver, and in actual fact, that's maybe less enjoyable than people might imagine, because you're no longer a fan looking from the outside. You're there in the middle trying to fight for every hundredth of a second and every opportunity, and you're trying to beat your teammate who's in the same team. It's wonderfully competitive. It's an emotional roller coaster, but it's also mentally exhausting on the other side. So in retirement from being a driver, I work in television. I don't influence who wins any Grand Prix. I talk about what I see. I try and put the people on inside the cockpit as much as I can by sharing with them some of the challenges of the racetracks. But in many ways, I'm just a more informed, a more experienced fan, but I'm still the same person that was that little teenager watching it on television.
Can you talk a little bit about the technical aspects of the car and kind of what the technology that's embedded in the vehicle that amplifies its performance and makes it the fastest car on the planet?
Well, in simple terms, for anyone that hasn't heard of Formula One before, if we start there, then Formula One car is the fastest race car on a closed circuit. There's cars that go faster in a straight line and accelerate faster and all of that sort of stuff, but a Grand Prix car can go round a racetrack faster than any other car in the world, and it achieves it a combination of things. One, of course, power. You need to be able to accelerate that vehicle as quickly as possible. A modern Formula One car is the most fuel-efficient engine in the world, which is something that accelerates efficiencies in the road cars that we drive in the future. And it's a hybrid, so there's a regeneration element of power that comes from braking and also heat from the turbo, which recharges that battery and then can be deployed in the very early phase of acceleration when the engine is in its lower torque state. So you bring that together, you have an engine that generates 1,000 horsepower using less fuel than at any point in the history of the world. So I think that's a pretty special thing to celebrate. Now that's fine in terms of making it go fast, but to make it go fast around a corner, we have aerodynamics. And we have a combination of aerodynamic performance. Part of it comes from the wings, which anyone that's seen an aircraft will know what the wings are. An aircraft goes along the runway, it generates lift, and it gets pulled up into the sky. Well, the wings on a Formula One car are effectively mounted the other way around. So the faster we go along the road, the more it pushes that car into the ground. And then through the tires, which are a particular compound, which are not built for 100,000 kilometers, they're built for a Grand Prix distance, 305 kilometers. So they are incredibly grippy, very sticky, and you get that downforce pushing the tires into the ground, and that enables the car to pull well over 5G. Now, what's G? Gravitational force. In everyday life, most road cars will never pull more than a 1G. If you have a crash, yes, but you obviously don't want to do that. We pull 5 times that in terms of its cornering ability, its deceleration, a bit less than that in acceleration. But that's why a Grand Prix car can go so quickly around a racetrack.
Given that, and given you're traveling at such a high speed, safety is a critical element to this. Motorsport, all motorsports. And there's been significant advancements in safety technologies. Can you share any personal experiences or insights that you've had where you've seen safety technology evolve over the course of your career?
Oh, the sport has evolved incredibly since I first started as a test driver back in the early 90s. You know, the cars at that time were at the cutting edge of the technology that was available, but we didn't have a head and neck protection system, we didn't have a halo, my shoulders were above the side of the cockpit, and all of that today may make people go, my God, you're crazy. But the reality is, if you look at motorcycle racing, the bike and the rider are still 2 separate elements. They've improved incredibly the protection, the leathers, airbags and things like that. But in many ways, there's room for improvement in that interface between the rider and the motorcycle is much, much smaller than it has been in car racing, because the driver is bolted with 6-point safety harness to the chassis, and there's a survival cell which is designed for bits to break off the car, absorbing energy, but keeping that survival cell intact and giving the driver a much higher chance of surviving and continuing to compete going forward. So I think that the sport safety has improved considerably. But what I think I would also like to recognize, at no point did I ever feel I was in danger. I don't feel in danger sitting here, but we don't know if something crashes into the building. I never felt in danger when I was a Grand Prix driver, and I drove RB19, which is last year's dominant Red Bull Formula One car, and I didn't go, oh, I feel safe in this car, because it's not the mindset of a Grand Prix driver, it's not the mindset of the skateboarder, it's not the mindset of anyone that, skiers. You're not thinking, oh, I could crash and hurt myself. You're thinking, I want to go as fast as possible. I want to exploit the performance of my skateboard or my skis or my Formula One car. So I think that in everyday life, there'll be something that people have done which gave them a little adrenaline because they're pushing their own limits. The difference in elite sport and motorsport and Formula One is we're used to pushing the limits to 100% every time we go in the car. And touch wood, fate will hopefully bring you home.
Switching gears a little bit, You've augmented your racing experience with experience now working in the media. How do you see technology changing the landscape of content production, sports broadcasting, content delivery? Do you give any thought to the role that technology plays in further popularizing sports like motorsport, Formula One, et cetera, in your sort of newish role?
Well, there's no question that the coverage has improved considerably. When I was first watching Formula One, you know, I'd be 10, 11, 12 years old, I guess, and in that time we had 4 television channels, and I used to get highlights package of Formula One, 30 minutes, and it was brilliant, but it was pretty basic. But of course now we have so many channels of information that the people at home, the fans of the sport, have all of the information I have available in the commentary box. The one thing they still don't have is the feeling of what it is to be in a Grand Prix car or to drive Montreal, which is happening this weekend. And that's still the element that I can add to that broadcast. But I think that all of that access is incredible, it's fantastic. I think modern technology and, you know, with Red Bull, we've been developing a high-speed drone. And we did a little feature earlier this year where the drone was kind of racing the Grand Prix car. And when that has got to its natural point, it will change motorsports broadcasting. You know, we're all used to incredible images from what drones can give us now, but you know, the future is very exciting, I think, in terms of giving people a sensation that they're in the car beyond just having the sort of static camera.
What innovations would you like to see in Formula One's future?
Yeah, the one thing that I know what it feels like to be a Grand Prix driver. I don't know what it feels like to be a MotoGP rider. I've been on the back of a MotoGP with a world champion. I've experienced, you know, that two-wheel limit, but I haven't done it. So what I would love to imagine in the future of sports broadcasting, that we can somehow have elements of, I don't know what it would be because it doesn't exist right now, but something that gives you the sensation that you can put yourself in Max Verstappen's car. And I don't mean visually, because they've got helmet cams and they're getting better. At the beginning, you were getting a lot of reflection, which I know is not how the driver sees it, but the television producer doesn't know that. So they go, hey, I can see what the driver sees, that must be it. So the more we make it real, the more it becomes a reality. And imagine if we had the face cam looking at the driver. You know, does Lewis drive like this, or does he drive like this? You know, what is the expression? We get to see tennis players and we get to see footballers, but we don't see that in motorsport. You know, maybe that's something in the future that can somehow they can broadcast that to us. But I would love to be able to sit on my sofa, put myself inside the car with Max, and somehow feel his heart rate, feel the forces on his body, and be immersed in that world. It would be a hell of a ride, you know, the G-forces and everything else that goes with it. But, you know, it's kind of like a real feel experience.
Can you talk about the role that data analytics plays in racing? These cars, as they drive around the track, I mean, they're collecting enormous amounts of data. They're feeding it back to pit crews, they're feeding it back to engineering teams, and they're in turn translating that data into real-time feedback to the driver to make slight adjustments or whatever it is. Can you talk a little bit about the role that data plays in racing and where you see that kind of going, especially in the with the advent of artificial intelligence? Will that play a role in racing at some point?
Well, data is the absolute center of everything that we do in Formula One. Nothing nowadays is conceived without the use of data from historical events. You know, AI is being used by all teams where it can be exploited, and that will continue to improve. There isn't currently something where you can just feed in, these are the technical regulations, and it will feed out the winning car, because there is so many variabilities in the real world. Tailwinds, crosswinds, drivers hitting a curb more, you know, there's a lot of variabilities in there. But the heart of everything we do is about data analytics and analysing to the computer's ability and capacity all of that information and then feeding it back to the driver, the human element, which then exploits that potential. So they are doing right now in the Middle East, they've got autonomous race cars. It's wonderful, but it's not a spectator sport. Spectator sports are about human endeavour. I think we all enjoy to look up to people that are doing something remarkable and think, how do they do that? And any high-level sport is something that I would take my hat off to their commitment. You know, brilliant men and women that find a talent and apply themselves, because it doesn't matter. Any of the great sports stars I've met over the years, and through Red Bull I've had the opportunity to meet many of them, they've got a common thread, which is an absolute steely work ethic. Talent will take you so far, but you've got to have work ethic and commitment and get people behind you and your team to rise to the highest level.
HTEC.